Well, this is the third episode of my experiences in national service in South Africa. But just to maybe pause at this time and say a few things that provides context to my training, how I experienced it, and some of the things that I discuss later on in the episodes. The first thing I'd like to note is that I became a Christian while I was doing studies. It was a time when I was enjoying myself, playing a lot of sport and not studying as I should, and had a lot of internal conflicts. But the end result was that I was brought to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, and particularly into the Reformed tradition of the Christian religion, which is very much part of the heritage of large part of South Africa, across all groups, racial groups. So for me, I'll maybe explain more of that prior to national service in due time. Enough to say at this point that I was very convinced by the truth of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ and how it is applied to the soul for conversion to God and preparation for eternal glory. Also, it put in me a determined desire to be faithful in whatever way that I had to be. So I was very consistent in quiet times, reading the Bible, prayer, and trying to learn a lot of doctrine, and which I'll explain, as I said, that earlier part of why I've thought like that at another time. The other thing I'd like to mention is that in the South African Army, we had a tradition of being Christian, deliberately Christian in the structures and how we did things. And that really came from South Africa's original heritage. We were established in 1652 under the auspices of the Dutch East India Company. And one of their tasks when they landed at the Cape, one of the tasks given to the leader, Jan van Riebeeck, was to establish the Reformed religion at the Cape. And so it was established. That's called the establishment principle. We moved away from that over time, but the results of that were still influencing our society in the right up to the 90s. Part of that influence on the army was that when we had to make commitments, then in our saluting, in our making commitments, we subscribed allegiance to Almighty God, the triune God, and often the Bible would be open in front of you. So the saluting of this flag was not just a nefarious symbolism or cynical event, but it demanded a respect to the highest authority, which would be the triune God. That you saw in a number of ways in the army, but particularly there was a morning quiet time for 15 minutes and an evening quiet time for 15 minutes that was very strictly implemented during basic training, certainly at Wansai. And I made use of that. The pastor who'd pastored me in the religion, Christian religion, on my conversion down in Cape Town, said, "Mark, when you come to the army, the first thing you do, when you have your quiet times, go down on your knees, because it shows others, but it also shows you and convinces you of the need to be deliberate in your religion and the seriousness of it." And so that's what I did. And the result was that it was respected, and it held me accountable to take these quiet times seriously in the reading of the word and in praying. So although it was an outward form, others just lay on their beds if no one was watching, or they just sat on their trommel, or they read something else. But the opportunity was there. And then, of course, you had church parade on the Sundays, on the Christian Sabbath, as we would say in the Reformed faith. And this was deliberate. It was a day of rest. There was no other activities happening, and you had to go to church parade when you went to your different churches in the morning, and you could also go in the evening. And there was no work done during that day. And huge benefit in that. And also there was a weekly prayer meeting. Now, it is true, during basics people are very tired, and so often in a church service or in a weekly prayer meeting, you'll be the only person awake if you wanted to be awake. And the doctrine wasn't always encouraging or that accurate and so on. So with all the limitations, there it continued. Just one other thing I want to mention. Group punishment. I think it's typical of all armies, but in the South African Army, it was central to your training. They called it an F up, if I can use that word, or in Afrikaans, op F. So obviously I'm putting a word in your head, but just that was the reality of it. The idea is to put you under severe physical and mental stress in order to build you into a unit and to give you a discipline of fear, which is a recognized quality, I think, even from the very earliest military training in South Africa. Part of our culture, unfortunately. So I'll continue later with the next episode. Thank you.